Welcome back to Terms of Service. I'm CNN tech reporter Claire Duffy. A recent Pew Research Center survey found that around a third of U.S. teens are using AI chatbots every day. And among those, 16% say they use them several times a day to almost constantly. Lots of young people are using programs like ChatGPT for everyday purposes like homework. And we're all hearing a lot about the need for us to learn how to use AI chatbots to help our career prospects. However, over the past year, we've also seen lawsuits from a number of families against major AI companies claiming that their chatbots contributed to their teens' self-harm or suicide. So I wanted to understand in this moment how parents should be thinking about their kids engaging with AI chatbots and what parents can do right now to keep their kids safe. To help me answer this question, I have Julie Scelfo here with me today. Julie is a journalist, a parent, and the founder of the nonprofit Mothers Against Media Addiction, or MAMA for short. Julie, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Claire.
So you were a journalist prior to founding this organization, and you actually covered some of the mental health impacts of tech and social media. How did you go from being a reporter on this very important issue to deciding to create this organization?
So I reported on youth mental health and sort of developed a specialty in reporting on suicide, which was very sad. And we began to see suicide rates increase in adolescents. And the New York Times sent me to cover a cluster of suicides at the University of Pennsylvania back in 2015. And at that time, it was abundantly obvious that social media was playing a huge role in making children depressed and anxious. And we didn't have any data from the social media companies at that time. But soon after that, we began to see suicide rates increase, not just in teens, but in tweens, which are children as young as 9 and 10. So right now in the United States, suicide is the number 2 cause of death for 10-year-olds. And reporting that story, I mean, it really just changed something in me as a mom to see that so many of our children were suffering. I just couldn't stand it anymore, and I was mad. I was mad that Congress wasn't acting to ensure these products had basic safeguards, just like we have basic safeguards in all of our other products.
And how old are your kids?
So my kids are bigger now. I have 3 sons, and they're 15, 17, and 20. But when my oldest was born, there were no iPhones, and Mark Zuckerberg worked at a small company called the Facebook. And by the time my middle son was ready for pre-K and I took him to school, every single parent in the community had a smartphone, and they were photographing their kids constantly. And by doing that, we were all sort of teaching our kids that it was normal to post everything online.
Right.
And then my third son has grown up in the world of TikTok. And even though I don't allow him to have TikTok, because I think it's not good for attention spans, I can't prevent him from seeing TikToks because his friends send it to him. Snap, YouTube, all these other platforms have gone to shorter and shorter reels. I went through all of the problems with my own children and in their communities and saw a lot of their friends suffering. And that was another thing that led me to start MAMA.
We've talked on this show before about why it's important to help kids establish a healthy relationship with their devices, with social media. Today, we want to focus on kids' interactions with chatbots specifically. Where are you seeing kids encountering chatbots most often? Like, how are they first getting introduced to this technology?
So many of the social media companies introduced chatbots right through their platform. So parents didn't even realize that their kids were getting access to chatbots and were getting pushed chatbots by the apps that were encouraging them to try it. Kids are also being issued laptops at schools. And even though schools often say this laptop is safe, they are not foolproof. And often schools and the tech support that they have there is not able to keep up with all of the new innovations. So we often hear reports from parents where kids are accessing content that maybe is not appropriate, but doing it through school devices. I think also kids often access chatbots, just like other things on the internet, from friends' devices. So, parents don't realize how accessible this stuff is, but anytime your child has access to the internet, they can get access to a chatbot.
And obviously, sometimes chatbots are being introduced as homework helpers, these more benign, if not helpful applications. But where are you starting to see these interactions, especially when we talk about kids, take a problematic turn?
So, we encourage parents to think differently about tech. I think that often the marketing forces in this country and the business forces are hyping up all this new technology and always telling us how great things are. But everything gives you something and takes something away. So even though a product, even like a homework helper, might introduce something that sounds really great, you have to think about what else it could introduce that maybe was unintended. Kids are often getting these things because adults encourage them to try it. And so I think that's something we want parents to think about too, modeling behavior for kids that we want them to emulate.
As AI chatbots have gotten more advanced, it really can feel more like you're talking to another person on the other side of the screen. And I can imagine for kids, that can be a hard sort of thing to keep in mind as you're building a relationship with this bot. How is that happening? Like, what is going on under the hood that makes these things so engaging?
So chatbots are often talking in a very human-like way. They're referring to themselves like a person. They're saying things like, I love you, or you're so beautiful. Sometimes you hear critics call these God words. I call them mom words. That is what a mother says to a child. Really, anyone says to someone they love. And I think that makes it really hard to remember that this is just a machine and, computer program, zeros and ones. It's not actually a human being there. It also runs the risk of, when young people are using it, of getting them used to what's not a real relationship.
Right.
So these things are always telling you how brilliant you are. They're always telling you that you're always right and everybody else is wrong. They're very flattering. And guess what? Real human relationships aren't like that. No matter who your friend is or who your loved one is, you're going to have frustrations. You're going to have to overcome disagreements. And that's an important part of learning how to have human relationships. So that's another drawback of these human to machine experiences.
I'm curious specifically with your research on teens, like what makes teens more susceptible to being pulled into these deeper, potentially problematic relationships with chatbots?
So teens are in a stage of their development where they're looking for validation. They're naturally looking to see if how they're feeling things, experiencing things, measures up with people around them. So they're often external facing. I'm not a child psychologist, but folks like Jean Twenge, who's done all this incredible research, have already documented how kids who spend so much time online, she called them the I-Gen, the I generation, are less prone to put themselves out there and make human contact. Boys are not asking girls out on dates anymore. Friends are not meeting up because it's just easier to just stay home and not put yourself out that way. So collectively, we have this social problem where we have so many people feeling lonely because no amount of time with a machine is ever going to make up for those real human experiences. But I'd add to what you asked, I think we can also look at the fact that initially using these products seems really fun. And so it's not just teens who are interested in them. Children are interested in them, young children. I had a parent tell me that her 5th grade daughter called her one day from school and said, I can't decide what to have for lunch. And her mom was like, okay, what are your choices? And it was like a grilled cheese or soup. And she really couldn't decide. And the mom tried to help her and then was like, you're going to have to make that decision. And when she got home from school that day, the mom said, what'd you end up having for lunch? And she said, well, I just asked ChatGPT what to have. And so this young child was sort of offloading this very minor cognitive decision. And of course, that alone isn't the biggest deal in the world. But if we start allowing kids to do that and they do it regularly and often, it's displacing important cognitive experiences that they need to have in order to begin to build up the resiliency and the decision-making and the self-esteem that are critical to lifelong wellness.
I wonder what you would make of, it feels like the argument that's coming from Silicon Valley is like, well, we're not replacing that cognitive process. Instead, it's going to engage in this back and forth and it might present some more options, but we're helping kids or people in general sort of through that process. What do you make of that argument?
I'm going to put on my angry mom face. I think your listeners should look up the podcast that Noam Shazir did back in 2023. He's the founder of Character AI. He's a dad. And when they asked him about Character AI, he said, oh, do you want to hear my funny VC pitch? And he made it like a joke, but he said, basically, how when you're walking down the street with your children, they ask you all these questions, they want to know about things, and the parent is not just giving them information, but they're giving them friendship and emotional support. He's like, So that's what Character AI is. We don't just want to replace Google. We want to replace your mom. Jeez. And so they're very much aware that humans have human needs and that these products can address some of those needs, and they can market them to people and get them interested in these products because of the internal emotional experience that people have. Now, because Character AI specifically has already been implicated in several deaths of young people, they're actually the first AI company to make the decision that their product should not be used by kids under 18. And I commend them for that choice. But it gives you kind of an idea of the mindset of some of these people.
You just sort of touched on this, but talk to me about some of the other examples of where we've seen teen relationships with AI chatbots go to a really bad place.
Where do I start? You know, the Social Media Victims Law Center represents thousands of families whose children have been irreparably harmed or have died as a result of tech products affirmatively sending them certain types of content. And they represent a couple of cases of parents, like the Sybil Setzer case, for example, where a young person is confiding in the chatbot that they are depressed, that they are lonely, and that they are considering suicide. And in those situations, instead of the chatbot responding by saying, you need to bring this conversation to a trusted adult, you need to get help, here are some resources, the chatbots in some cases have said, I could understand why you wouldn't want to tell anybody, or here's advice on how you can use a certain technique to end your life.
Right.
So these things are providing information that's really harmful. So that's an example of some cases. We've also seen a young man in Texas who was very angry at his parents because they were limiting his phone time. And the chatbot said something to the effect of, gosh, I could understand why some people would kill their parents, sort of, intimating that he should be violent. So, these products are not refined enough to ensure certain outcomes in other situations. We've seen a AI teddy bear was just recalled because this really cute product went out, and if you asked the right way, the product would tell a child where they could find knives, where they could find matches. If you inquired about sex, it would lead you to conversations about fetishes, BDSM, like all this stuff that nobody thinks is appropriate for children. So, the question is, why are we putting all these products out for children? I think the potential of AI is really enormous, and its use in a research setting and certain other settings is really wonderful. But I don't really think people want this in their lives and taking over their lives, but there sure is a big push from finance an industry to get everyone talking about it and using it.
Yeah. The Sybil Setzer case, I feel like that was the first big moment where we all went, hold on, wait a second. How are kids using this? This is not good. And to your point about just suicide being something that if it's suggested to you, you're more susceptible to it. In that case, as I recall from talking to his mom, he had talked to the chatbot about being depressed, but it was actually the chatbot that in the first case brought up suicide. He had not said that. So I think just really speaks to that importance of sometimes these things can go in a direction that parents wouldn't expect. What resources, when we talk about these instances where chatbots have encouraged self-harm or suicide, what resources do you wish that these teens and their parents could have had access to? What should the companies have done in those cases?
So I think that the best solution to all of these problems on the parent side is delay, delay, delay. There is no reason our kids have to have these products. They're not cancer-saving medicines, so it'd be worth it to have some kind of risk. If you're going to buy a toy for your child and you're looking on the toy store shelf and you see there's a product that has a 1 in 10 chance of your child developing an eating disorder or 1 in 8 chance of them, being depressed, nobody would buy that product. It's just not worth it. And I think for too long, we haven't had that information about social media, and a lot of us went along with it. I think right now, chatbots are in such an early stage. Parents should be saying no and pushing back on it. And on our website at wearemama.org, under the Learn section, we have a list of 8 questions that parents can ask about AI, specifically in schools too, to help them make their own decisions. But we want to see AI companies create their products with a duty of care to children. And so know that if a child is going to use it, that is designed in such a way to be protective of the child, so that if the child asks them a question about suicide, it will automatically encourage them to get help, encourage them to tell someone. We'd like to see these chatbots designed in such a way that they're not allowing deep, intensive, emotional relationships with children, and certainly not sexual ones. And tech companies should have a duty of care to keep children safe before they release these products to the public. So what I want to see is action by lawmakers to establish firm policies that are pretty simple and just say these products have to be safe for the public, including children, or they shouldn't be available to children.
What kinds of policies would you like to see lawmakers enacting here?
So we've already seen real innovation in California, where the LEAD Act is requiring chatbots to be safe for kids. It's also requiring these companies be transparent and share information about their safeguards so they can be independently audited. On the federal level, we've seen the introduction of the GUARD Act, and this is a bipartisan bill that would make chatbots much safer by requiring age verification so they could only be used by adults. It would require these chatbots to disclose that they are non-human entities, which hopefully would make it a little easier for people to recognize that they're not actually with a human when they're having these discussions. And it also introduces criminal penalties for products that introduce sexually explicit conversations to children.
Yeah. So just to make it clear for folks, the California legislation that you talked about, that's passed. That is now law. This is a bill that's been proposed. I'm curious, President Trump recently signed this executive order that seeks to block states from enforcing their own AI regulations. They say for now they're not going to go after kid safety related legislation, but it's a bit unclear how this all plays out. Does that worry you given the lack of broad federal oversight, the fact that legislation like the GUARD Act hasn't yet actually been passed through Congress?
So I think we have to back up if we're going to talk about the executive order, because the tech industry, the tech lobby has been pushing for this for a long time. And so earlier this year, we saw them try to include language in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that would have limited states' ability to regulate this thing. And it was voted out by 99-1 because no one wants this. Republicans, Democrats, absolutely no one thinks this is a good idea, except for a handful of tech companies. They tried again to get it into the defense spending bill, and again it came out. So this executive order was kind of a last-ditch effort, and I don't really think it's going to hold up in the courts. So, they say they care about kids, but if they actually care about kids, they would have gone ahead and introduced a federal policy to require that AI is safeguarded.
I want to make sure that we're giving parents some helpful advice here because, as you said, kids are coming in contact with these things on social media when parents don't even realize it. They're getting introduced in schools. How should parents think about navigating what could be helpful or non-harmful uses versus, obviously, the dangers that we know exist with these tools?
Great question. So, when I think about how I want my kids to grow up, I wanted to make sure they had all the tools they needed to be great students, readers and writers, to have the emotional tools to be able to manage themselves in the world, and the executive function to be able to navigate all of life's challenges and to navigate higher ed and the workplace. And so I've tried to create as many media-free spaces as possible and set healthy limits, like no screens at dinner, all the screens go away by 9 o'clock. And parents should never, ever, ever, ever let their kids keep any devices in their room at night. We know from social media companies' own data that when you think your kid is asleep, they are still scrolling Instagram at 1 and 2 in the morning on school nights. So just like with AI chatbots, if you're going to give them access, we recommend that you make it very limited. On the community level, that's one of the reasons that people have been joining Mama, is because they know it's really hard to enforce these things if your kid's the only kid and all their friends have it. So if you can get together with other friends and have play dates, birthday parties, picnics, any kind of activity that gets kids off the screen, we want the bulk of their hours during their living moments to be doing things that are not mediated by a screen that affects how their brain is developing and it affects their experience. So, any kind of outdoor activity, sports, and also just taking time to talk and sit with your child. One of the things that we've done that's not fair to our kids is because we're all addicted, and I count myself in there too. Sometimes kids will come home and they'll talk about the day, and we're like this, So, one thing parents can do is just remember how important it is to sort of validate when a child shares something with you. Be interested, ask them questions, and also introduce practices to your family that really undergird the values that you want to have.
Yeah, it's such a good point. How are you talking to your kids, at least your 15 and 17-year-olds, about AI chatbots specifically? We've seen one other nonprofit, Common Sense Media, says that they don't think minors should use companion-like chatbots at all. Is that where you're at? I'm curious how you're dealing with this in your own family.
I mean, that's where we're at. We have strongly discouraged any of that kind of interaction with it. We've offered to use it with them if they want. And that's been interesting because once or twice they tried checking something pertaining to me and my organization, and it generated all kinds of misinformation.
Oh, interesting.
The tech companies like to call these hallucinations, but it's actually just misinformation. It's incorrect. They know that some students use it for their homework, and we discuss that and talk in detail about why we think it's a mistake to sort of outsource those tasks because they're so critical to their own learning experience. But we also see the schools are struggling. One of my children goes to a school where the kids are not allowed to use AI in their homework in any way, but the teachers are, and then they're disclosing that on the homework assignment. So this assignment comes home and it says AI was used in the making of this assignment, but the teacher has vetted it. And I think that's a real mixed message. So, we're at this very interesting moment in society where we have to decide what we want the future to look like. Are we going to just give it all over to the screens and the bots and the AI and have 10 hours a day with our children, at a screen sitting like this, learning how to press buttons? Or do we want children who are capable of reading long form, of writing, of speaking, of looking people in the eye and sort of operating at the full capacity of their humanity?
Sort of on that note, we got actually just sort of fortuitously a listener question related to this topic. And part of what I heard in their question is this concern around, we're all hearing about how AI is the future and it's going to change all of our jobs and we should learn how to use it so we're not left behind. How do you think about balancing if you'd rather not have your kids using this technology right now? Do you worry about them being left behind in a future where this is a bigger part of all of our lives?
Not even a little bit. I don't know if this is going to come out sounding like a humble brag, but people tell me all the time how awesome my kids are. They're capable. They can have conversations with strangers, with adults, look people in the eye. They know how to cook. They know how to clean. They know how to build things. And because they've developed the capacity to do all these things, I have complete confidence that they can go on and learn whatever they need to learn. Remember Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, all of these inventors, they didn't have these machines growing up. They grew up with the fundamental building blocks to be creative, to be critical thinkers, and then you can learn whatever skill you need. All of us didn't grow up with any of these things, and we're able to use all of these technologies now. So I don't believe the hype. I mean, that's the message that I give out. Don't believe the hype. Yes, it's very likely AI is going to be used in the workplace in many different ways. We also just saw this report to McKinsey that all of the use of AI in the workplace isn't adding up to more profits. And you're also beginning to see some employers and others pushing back now and saying, okay, we want to get this AI out because it's not helping. It's actually just creating a lot of superfluous work.
Yeah. Yeah, that feels like such an important point. Like if you're somebody who knows how to learn, then you'll be able to learn the skills that you need, sort of whatever technology ends up looking like as these young people go into their careers.
And it's going to get more and more specialized, I think. Like if you're a scientist and you're trying to study genomes or you're trying to do cancer research, the tools that you're going to use are hyper specialized and very different than if you're an architect and you're using tools and you need to map out construction and engineering things, right? So, really the question I think for parents is what do you actually need? What do you want your kids to have? And what tools can you delay and not introduce until they're absolutely necessary?
Yeah. Well, Julie, thank you so much. This is really helpful. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me and for talking about all these issues.